Mikel Arteta has hit back and claims that he is leaving Arsenal while simultaneously ruling out the potential of some January signings. Meanwhile, Arsenal take on Nottingham Forest as Premier League action returns. However, there's not so good news surrounding Thomas Partey's availability for this fixture. This is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is our Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. It's there's only 3 more of these left, believe it or not. We've got, I say 3. We might do one the day after deadline day, although I'm not sure that we will. Of course, as you know how this works, the Arsenal Transfer Show goes on a month before the window opens and goes through until the window closes. And then we start the Arsenal News Show back up again during the period between those windows. So up until, well, June, we'll be doing the Arsenal News Show. And it's you see on the screen where it says Arsenal Transfer Show, episode 428, and you think, well, that's a lot. But then you realize actually we've done like 300, nearly 400 Arsenal news shows on top of that as well. Yes, we've been doing 8 a.m.s for basically nearly 3 years. Crazy scenes. But I've enjoyed every second of it. So thank you so much for tuning in. As always, good morning to those that are live with us. Black Shine, Graham, Jimbo, Amesy, Clincy, Errol. We got James and Jimbo and Louis and Tony and Martin. We've got Rich, Stephen, Morgie, Martin, Amira, Mike, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Marcus, I see too. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Do please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. Matthew says, why don't you do a transfer roundup day after separate if you have time? I could do that. You're right. That is possible. And I am off on Friday. So there's potential, Matthew, for that to happen. But we'll cross that bridge if and when it comes. I'll tell you what, though, it has been a transfer window where I have done one tactical breakdown. Usually when we have like a transfer window, I'm doing loads of tactical breakdowns on players that we've been linked to, but I've not needed to. We did one on Amadou Onana, and that was it, because we've just not been linked with players that we might be signing with any real validity to it. So we've not needed to do the not needed to do the tactical breakdown show. But still, so many of you have watched, so many of you have tuned in, and we're very close to hitting 54,000 subscribers as well. So thank you to the support that you've continued to give the channel. As I mentioned, it is indeed match day, and if you want to get our thoughts on the game against Nottingham Forest, which takes place at 7:30 p.m. tonight, you can go back and watch our preview show that we did. I was joined by Dan, Tom, and Jordan from our Discord server to have a good chat about Nottingham Forest against Arsenal tonight. We gave our lineups. We talked about the team news. We talked about the narrative surrounding certain players. We talked about some of Mikel Arteta's comments, which we're also going to talk about this morning. And we talked a little bit about Matt Turner, of course, as well, who faces his former club once again, and Nuno Tavares will be in the squad. So we move into today's transfer stories, and we start with one regarding Marquinhos. Of course, the Arsenal winger who was on loan at Nantes for the first half of the season has been recalled, but Luis Fabiani, who is part of Italia, which is a Sao Paulo-based journalist outlet, he has reported that Corinthians are interested in signing Marquinhos, and that in fact their recruitment people could be flying into London and hoping to improve things. Oh, is the connection going weird for you? I'm sorry if it is. That's not good. It's probably the Wi-Fi. My bad. But we're back. Sorry. So Marquinhos will be hopefully. I suppose we're hoping that he's sold and we get a good fee for him. That is the hope that we do. And I'm hoping that we get a good fee because he cost us about 3 million euros. 3 million? Yeah, 3 million euros, 3.5 million euros, I think it was, about 3 million pounds. And we're hopeful that he will indeed be moved on for, if not the same price, then a little bit more. And that's what we'll hope for with Marquinhos. But it's not been a successful signing so far. And as I've heard and reported, every option is open for Marquinhos. It could be returning to the youth side. It could be going out on loan again. It could be signing for another team on a permanent deal. But at the moment, it's we'll give you the news as soon as we get some more about it. Mikel Arteta has, however, we've got to talk about his press conference, which is going to take up the bulk of today's news. He was answering questions surrounding the reports that emerged from Spain, which claimed that he would be moving on at the end of the season. And when he was asked about it, if he would be leaving, he says, "Who? Me? No, that's totally fake news. What you read yesterday, I don't know where it's coming from. It's totally untrue, and I'm really upset about it." He was asked about the report that came out. He says, "I could not believe it. I don't know where it's coming from. It's got no sources. It's got nothing. And I think we have to be very cautious when we talk about personal things to put it in the way that it was put out yesterday." He was asked about having unfinished business at Arsenal, to which he said, "I'm in the right place. I'm with the right people. I feel really good about it. And as I said many times, I'm immersed in a beautiful journey with this football club, these players, this staff, and our people. And I'm investing still a lot for them." And about the potential of being linked with Barcelona, he says that's something we cannot control. This is a part of football. That's something very different to someone putting out a statement for something that I'm doing. That's very different. The other one is just a part of football and this industry. That's it. And lastly, he was asked, of course, about whether or not he would be signing a new contract to kind of put to bed any question marks about his future. He says, "I've got a strong relationship with the board, with Edu, the team, with the ownership. Things come in a natural way, and we've always done it that way, and it's been done very well. When the time is right, we'll have those discussions, and I'll think about the best way to do that." And I'm not surprised that he was so angry about it and took it so personally. He was asked later on by some of the other journalists on why he was so angry about yesterday's report regarding his future for himself. Is it anger for himself or was it for the fans? And he says, "Well, one is a consequence of the other. First of all, because I'm really cautious of when I talk publicly about my personal things. And when someone puts out a statement about what I said or did, it is upsetting. I understand that we are in this industry. And the second one is that no one deserves to hear that in news like that. I've always been really straight, and I will say completely the opposite to that, of how happy and grateful I am and how much I enjoy where I am right now. So that's the reason as to why I'm upset." And you can't blame the guy. You really can't blame the guy for being upset. If you're, imagine being in a job and you have no intention of leaving and you're doing what you believe to be is a good job, no matter what critics you might have, and then you find out that someone's been going around saying publicly that you're leaving, and they're saying it as if it's fact, not like not an opinion, not like talking in a terms of, because everyone's allowed and entitled to have an opinion. It's very different to put out something that says categorically Arteta has told people that he's considering leaving and claiming that to be true when it's not been double sourced, triple sourced, checked with the club, whether or not it's true. And certainly Mikel Arteta is well within his rights to call it what it was. And I don't really like the term fake news because I think it gets used in a wrong way quite a lot. I think it gets used to just basically kind of detach what is actually fact. Like a fact would be labeled at someone and they can just be like fake news when it's actually not. And it is true, and it happens quite a lot politically, but we won't go down that dark pathway. But certainly in this context, Arteta is more than within his rights to label it what it is because he has no intention of leaving Arsenal. And from my understanding, the club and he is very calm about his future and about his time at the club that is expected to be extended. I hope that it's going to be extended, but there's no expectation that it won't be extended. But I really do hope that, and hope anyway, that we find ourselves in a position where Arteta is continuing as Arsenal manager, because I think that is still the right pathway forwards for the club. Moving into team news, he was asked about the latest team news, and he said, "We've got some late decisions to make. Thomas won't be one of those, but we have a few that have had some issues at the end of the last game, and we're still uncertain about those." He was asked if Partey will be in the squad, and he said Thomas is not in the squad. No, it's what it is. You want everybody available, and he's a top player for us, a really important player for us. But at the moment, he's not fit yet. He was asked about whether Partey will be involved against Liverpool, and he said, "We will see. We'll see how it evolves, and if that's too short or that's okay." So the Partey one is frustrating. Of course, we've seen him in training. We've seen him in training images. There's been suggestions. I mean, the fact that the club put out the images about with Partey training has always been a little bit of a, a little bit of a you give that boost to the fans of seeing Partey in training, and then for him not to be in the next game squad is a bit of a like, oh, well, that's a downer. But I suppose you want to give a lift in some ways. He was asked about if Rice was one of those players that he has to make a late call on. He said he is one of those players. Yes, he's done some work, but has missed some work as well. Hopefully, he's going to be okay. And he was asked about Gabriel, and he said, yeah, he's another one of those two. As I've mentioned, he has been carrying a knock, which is what we've come to expect as well. There wasn't anything in the press conference asked about kind of transfers, considering it was and it is deadline day on Thursday. There was nothing asked to him in the broadcast section, at least. I haven't seen the embargoed section yet of the press conference, but certainly there was nothing said in regards to the broadcast section on transfers. However, he did do an interview with TNT Sports in which he confirmed that there wouldn't be any more deals in terms of incomings. He says it wasn't possible to do any January deals. We didn't have the capacity to improve the team in the way that we think we want to improve it. So we decided not to do something yet. We have one of the thinnest squads in the league, that's for sure. And I suppose that this is going to obviously bring about frustration for supporters. It's going to bring about the most frustration for supporters that, if I'm being very blunt and honest, don't understand what actually has gone on this window and why Arsenal can't do business is the way that we would maybe like them to. I always like to stress that this does not come from a reluctance to spend money or a reluctance to buy players. That is certainly not what this is about. It is that they simply cannot and they're not able to do the business that they want to do, as he says, yet. But the summer is what they're going to be expected to really attack to improve the squad for next season. And sadly, we can't see any deals happening unless there is a really big surprise in the next couple of days regarding an outgoing, which frees up some funds, or a loan. But again, I really don't think that's going to happen. And for those that think, well, with the options to do a loan and we've not done that either, well, a loan is also really, really difficult to do. And because of that, you can't, if you're trying to find a player that you can sign on loan, they've got to be of the requisite quality that adds to what you've already got. And also, they've got to be available on a temporary basis with no transfer fee attached. And to find that player is really, really hard. Lynn says, Tom, I don't think this is true, and I think there might be a surprise on the last day. Lynn, I hope you're right. We know Arteta is not exactly always 100% truthful in some of his answers. So we can be hopeful. We can keep our fingers crossed that there is going to be a surprise on deadline day. I would be shocked if there is one. But we will wait and see. I can see a lot of you are asking about Cedric and Nuno Tavares. The Nuno Tavares links to Marseille have gone very quiet because Marseille did sign a left back. So I'd be surprised now if they do move for Tavares. There were talks between the clubs, but sadly, Nottingham Forest, it seems, weren't able to come to an agreement about terminating that loan move. They still needed the player, of course, whilst the likes of Ivory Coast, who, of course, progressed in surprising fashion. Amazing scenes, really, when you consider the fact that Ivory Coast sacked their manager and then progressed and have now reached the quarterfinals after beating Senegal yesterday. So that's really quite interesting. But Nottingham Forest obviously affected by those players as well. And so I really do hope that we can find solutions for the players like Tavares and Cedric in the long term, but it doesn't seem that will happen in this window. Cedric could still leave. There's an expectation that there will continue to be talks with clubs in Turkey over the potential move of Cedric, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And of course, we'll bring you any updates of that when that happens. Now, there are only a few days left of the latest Dennis Bergkamp prize. There's less than 100 tickets remaining, of course. UK only. You can win a signed and framed Dennis Bergkamp Arsenal shirt with a built-in TV, which shows some of the players' highlights during his time at the club, that legendary, iconic figure. There is plenty of other instant win prizes like a signed Rice shirt, a signed Zinchenko shirt, a signed and framed Smith Rowe shirt, a signed Vieira photo, a signed Partey photo, and one of Nigel Winterburn, Steve Bold, Tony Adams, and Lee Dixon, a signed photo montage of them, as well as a home kit from this season that you could win, as well as plenty of football prizes, site credit also. So make sure that you get involved with the latest competition if you haven't done so already. Link down in the description. UK only. Best of luck to those that get involved with it. And if indeed you are successful, please do get in touch, because I love to hear that you win the prizes. It's great to know that you're getting your hands on these. We had someone win a Martinelli shirt in the last prize draw, which was great. Hopefully one of the TGT family can win some of the prizes on offer here. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions then right after this. Okay, let's jump into the chat box. I saw a question about the Turkish January window or winter window and when it runs from. It says, I'm trying to have a look of when it closes. So Turkey, it says, according to transfer marks during this season, if it works for me, Turkey closes on February 9th. So deals can still be done with Turkish teams all the way up until February 9th. Brazilian markets, I think, open till all the way through to March, potentially. So Marquinhos could leave anytime between now and March, but there are lots of other windows still open. Portugal is open till the 2nd of February. You've got club nations like Israel's open to February 6th. Austria's open till February 6th. Romania's February 12th. It's quite late. Croatia's open to February 15th. Switzerland's also open to February 15th. Poland until February 22nd. Serbia until February 16th. Obviously, the Eastern European side of things as well. But yeah, interesting to see how many of these countries are open. Sweden and Norway are open till March, April time. So, and they open in February or end of January. So there could still be moves in the market after the English window closes. And Russ, they don't get longer. It's just a different time frame. So their windows open at different stages and close at different stages because usually their seasons start at different times compared to ours. So Turkey's window opens on January 11th, as opposed to ours opening on January 1st. So the windows are different depending upon when the league seasons are. So it's not about being unfair. Different leagues open at different times, but they're still very similar periods of time that they are open for. Let's jump into the chat. Kish says, thoughts on ex-Celtic forward Jota that is linked to West Ham. I thought that he could have been a good addition for us in the summer. I'm not sure, Kish, if it would have been. I don't know how much football he's even been able to play because my best knowledge of that matter was that he signed for, was it Al Ittihad? And then they signed so many players outside of the quota that he actually couldn't end up playing, which seemed a bit strange. Let me just double check how many games he's actually played. Yeah, he's played 5 league games in the Saudi Pro League, and then he's not been eligible for any of the league games since September, rather crazily. So, because he wasn't registered. He did play in the AFC Champions League, the Asia Champions League, and scored in their recent 2-1 win over Sepahan in their group. But beyond that, he's not been able to play because of eligibility rules. But I don't think that would have been the right move. For us, Alvin Mod says, how come we didn't make a move for Victor Gyökeres? Probably because we didn't have 80-odd million quid in the bank to spend. Well, not in the bank, but we didn't have the £80 million freedom to spend on players as well. Let's go to Joshua says, why do we expend so much energy moaning about the club that we support or we purport to support? Just get behind the manager and the team. What happens, happens. It's just a game of football. Joshua, you're never going to get on board with everybody with words like that, saying it's just a game of football. Whilst I empathise with the view, I think that ultimately it's going to be very, very difficult to get people looking at it in the same fashion as you. People are allowed to criticize. I always say that you're allowed to be critical as long as you come and back up those criticisms, as long as it's respectful as well. But you can still support and criticize at the same time. It is possible. Jimbo says, because he's an Arsenal player, it's boring, people whining about it and missing his improvements or his impact in matches. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about Havertz at this stage more than anything else, but you'll have to let me know who it is. Talk Politics says, Tom, we recalled Omar Rekic, who was doing well at Wigan despite his injuries. Do you think they consider him ready to fight for a first team place? I don't think we did recall him. I think his loan spell ended, did it not? I was pretty sure his loan spell ended with Wigan, but I might be wrong. Omar Rekic recalled. I'll hold my hands up if I am, but I felt like I read it as like his loan just came to an end with Wigan. Wigan loan. Let me just double check it. I didn't think it was a recall. I thought it was. Yes. Let's go to the Wigan website. It says Arsenal defender Omar Rakic has returned to Wigan Athletic on loan. And that's the one when he actually signed. There was a Wigan Athletic article about him returning. Yes. Omar Rakic returns to Arsenal following the expiration of his loan spell. Yes, it wasn't a recall. The loan expired. So, yeah, it was not a case of us recalling him. And maybe he'll go out on loan again between now and the end of the season. Otherwise, he'll just be with the under-21s. But he is over the age of 21. So he would be one of the over 21 players in the squad. I think he's 22? Yeah. So I think he would probably count as one of the over 21s in that under 21 youth squad. Mark says, Tom, what do you think of the development of Lokonga and whether we'll recall him after his loan spell ends? Well, he will obviously return when his loan ends at the end of this season. I don't know what will happen with him in the summer, of course. He's been doing quite well since actually returning from his injury problems that he had in the first half of the season. And his return to the Luton team has coincided with definitely an improvement in form of Luton overall. And he can certainly be credited with an improvement of that form because of his performances and because of his contributions to Rob Edwards' team. So let's wait and see, I suppose, what happens with Lokonga. I tweeted out the other day saying this might be a bit of a hot take, but I don't think Lokonga's story at Arsenal is necessarily over yet. So let's wait and see. I mean, if you're going to bring Lokonga back, you're going to lose. If we lose Jorginho, if we don't renew him, if we lose El Neni and we don't renew him, and if we lose Partey, if we sell him, we bring in, say, a Zubimendi, we're still kind of short in midfield. So it might make sense actually to reintegrate Lokonga to some extent if we lose a key number of players from that midfield area and we don't have the funds or the financial freedom necessarily to replace all of them. So yeah, let's see what happens in the summer. But I don't think the door is necessarily 100% closed. And I have asked Arteta personally about whether or not, there is still a pathway for certain players that leave on loan, like Charlie Patino. And he always stresses that they look within first. They look internally. They see, is there a solution to what we need internally before we look at the transfer market, which is what you should do. You should look internally first. And if you don't feel as though the players that you have at your disposal are good enough, that is when you go into the market, if you can. So yeah, let's see. Oki says 65 million, which could have been spent better in the summer or now when we need reinforcement. The last 2 years we have suffered late in the season disappointment after not doing enough business in January. Again, the Havertz deal is certainly going to be something that is fairly criticised if it doesn't end up working out for us. It did seem, I think people have called it something of a luxury deal we did in the summer, and I agree. I don't agree with those that say that Havertz was brought in to replace Xhaka. I really do think that Partey and Rice was the long-term partnership plan, and Rice's arrival is what ultimately pushed out and made the decision so much easier for Xhaka to move on. Ghost Speller says, Tom, how many players do you think Arsenal need in the summer? I personally think we need 2 forwards, 2 midfielders, and a defender. I think we need a centre forward. I think we need a wide player. I think we need at least 1 midfielder, maybe even 2. And I think we arguably need another defender as well, maybe 2. So I don't think you're that far off, to be honest. And that's just because it's not just about the fact that we've not finished the project in time. It's because there is also a natural churn of players as players get older, as we're experiencing with Partey and Jorginho and El Neni, of course, as well. As some players just seem to be proven to be not good enough and are sold, in my opinion, like Eddie Nketiah, for instance. There is a natural churn of players. Andy says, Tom, have you got your live show cast yet? Yes, Andy, I do. But it is a surprise, and it will be kept a surprise until the day. So I'm afraid you can't keep poking me for hints. It is going to be a surprise, so just wait and see. Magambo says, are Smith Rowe links to Napoli true? They might be interested, but Arsenal have no interest in letting him go, that's for sure. Alexander says, what would this season be like if we had Timber and Partey? Football can be so cruel. You're absolutely right. It might be very different, but we've got to deal with what we've got, and we've got to try and play with what we've got. And there are games we should have won despite, yes, we've not had those players, but with the players that we did have, like Fulham away, West Ham at home, we should still be winning those games. So you can't always look to injuries. It's certainly been an effect on this season, but certainly you have to also take it in context, and we deserve to win those games as well. Papalova says, Tom, I think Liverpool game will define and shape our season, so it's a must win. I agree, and I've said this. This week is probably the most important week in Arsenal's title challenge hopes. We have to win both games, I think, to be very much in it. We have to, at minimum, win tonight and then avoid defeat against Liverpool to stay hanging on to it. But I think really we have to be looking at these two games as must wins. As to be honest, is what if you're in a title race, every single game is really a must win. It's very difficult to not have games as a must win. I mean, Man City away becomes more of a must win the closer we get to it because of we need to pick up the points and we need to take points off of our rivals as well. So that is really, really important. Tizer says, so when you say that we need 2 forwards and 2 midfielders and a defender, who would you sell and who would you buy to fill the positions in an ideal world? Yeah, and that's that last line of being an ideal world is the hardest part. I often do say that the centre forward, it's always important to wait, I think, until the summer before you start putting your chips down on certain players or certain positions. I can tell you who I think needs to be moved on. I think Eddie Nketiah, his time at Arsenal is probably coming to, in my opinion. I think we need to be looking at upgrading and getting, improving certain positions. I think that you look at the wide areas, Reece Nelson, of course, as well. Another one you could perhaps see Partey moving on because of his injury record is not sustainable. And so replacing him with a Martin Zubimendi, I did a piece about him yesterday and how he would replace Partey. And there's some really good signs from his numbers that he's producing with Sociedad, of course, as well. So I think that it's more the outgoings you can be definitive about. But incomings, I think you have to wait until the summer and the end of this season before you can start making judgments about who we should bring in, because things can change so quickly. A player that I want now could get an ACL injury tomorrow and be out for 9 months. Or a player that I want now could ultimately have a really poor end to the campaign as well. Let's go to Marcus says Genk's VAR error and match replay. Your thoughts? Is this a dangerous or good precedent? Genk match replay. I heard whispers on social media yesterday. Okay, so let's go on the BBC report of this. A Belgian Pro League match between Anderlecht and Genk will be replayed in full because of an error made by the video assistant referee. The incident occurred in Genk's 2-1 defeat by Anderlecht at Lotto Park on the 22nd of December when Urasaw scored a rebound from a missed penalty. VAR disallowed the goal because the Genk saw encroached in the area, but ignored encroachment by 2 Anderlecht players. A Genk appeal based on the rules being misapplied by VAR was upheld. And Law 14.3 of the International Football Association Board states that if there is encroachment by both a defending and attacking player, the penalty kick should be retaken regardless of whether the kick is scored or not. And Genk said in a statement that the Disciplinary Council of Professional Football has declared itself competent to rule on the matter, which overturned the earlier decision of the professional referee department not to replay the match. The statement added that the council then followed Genk's argument that the match officials misapplied the rules and a penalty phase in question. A date for the match to be replayed has not yet been agreed. Genk are 5th in the Belgian top flight, while record 34 times champions Anderlecht sit second. Very interesting indeed. Of course, in the article it referenced the Liverpool-Tottenham controversy, which would be massive in regard to the title race. That game being replayed could mean that not only do Liverpool get a chance to win that, but they could be a chance to be unbeaten if they were winning that game. Does it set a dangerous precedent if you replay entire matches because of those decisions? Arguably it does. Because a team might be in a very different state come the day of the game of the replay. Different players might be available that weren't available then. Is that in essence is that honouring the game as is? I don't know. I don't know if it does. I'm not sure. I think in these situations, you just have to accept that a mistake happens and that meddling too much and replaying a game, I think, takes things too far. That's where I sit right now, based upon just reading that report and coming up with an opinion on it based on the limited discussion we've had on it. I could probably be convinced otherwise if people come up with good enough counter arguments, but I think that it sets a worrying kind of, because then where does it stop? At what point, at what VAR decision is worth a replay and what isn't? Is a red card? Is an offside? Is a goal being disallowed? At what point do you say this is worth a replay and this isn't? I think it sets a worrying precedent, personally. Dale says, what was the plan for Havertz? It sounds like it was primarily as a sub, plan B off the bench and rotational starter. Makes the £65 million price tag even more ridiculous. I think, Dale, if you're thinking about it like that, you're forgetting that lineups are different. I think you're forgetting that £100 million Jack Grealish is sometimes on the bench for Manchester City. Arteta wanted more options. Arteta wanted variation in his squad. And sadly, he hasn't been able to utilize either of Havertz or, of course, because he's been injured, Timber, I think, in the way that ultimately we've wanted to see them. So, Dale, I think you're missing out some key context in that criticism. Without a doubt, the deal in itself, the Havertz move as a player and how he's performed since then can be scrutinized. But the thinking behind the deal, I still think is sound. And actually, yesterday, Tom raised a really good points, Tom Sable, on our preview show. And if you look back at Havertz's performances this season, you can point to maybe 3 or 4 ones that, weren't good. But actually, he has contributed, I think, more than he's been criticised, and he isn't given enough credit for what he's done. But in the context of a £65 million signing, we'd want more. And I don't think that's an unfair position to be in. Phil White says, Tom, what did you make of Arteta's comments saying Arsenal have one of the thinnest squads in the league? I mean, I think there was 2 sides to it. I think one, you can say he's right. We do, because of injuries. We have one of the thinnest teams in the league. But B, you have to argue that, well, if you have a thin squad, could money have been that was spent on Havertz be spent differently? And I think that you could argue that, yeah, it probably could have been. That £65 million could have been spent differently so that it's not as thin as it is now. So I think there is 2 sides and a balanced response to that suggestion. But ultimately, it's always, as I say, important to not take Arteta's words so literally, because if you do, you're always going to find pitfalls with them, because what he says in a press conference and what happens to be the reality and what he's holding back and what he's not saying are very, very different. So, yeah, and like it says, you can get 2 starting players, 65 million. And we have Zinchenko and Ødegaard cost 65 million quid, about that figure. So we know that we can get 2 starting quality players for 65 million pounds, which is why it will go down as a signing, I think, at the moment, that will be scrutinized for potentially having been and could have been spent better. So, yeah, there you go. Oki says, ifs and buts, we'll never have a fully fit squad for an entire season. Having a couple of quality players covering 3 or 4 positions is risky, as Harry argued recently. It is, because if you do lose one of those players that's very versatile, you lose them across multiple areas. So Tomiyasu not being available is a big loss. Timber not being available is a big loss. When Trossard's not available, he can be a big loss of depth in the forward line. Partey, who can cover at centre mid, CDM, and right back for Arteta, is a big loss. And he's a big loss anyway, let alone because of the positions that he's covered also. But yeah, you're right. The number of positions we lose if we have players that try and fit multiple areas, if you lose them for extended periods, they can be very, very frustrating indeed. Yasin says the thinnest squad argument is not viable since they've opted for players with versatility. I think Harry raised the problems with going for versatile players. I think that the versatile player strategy works. I just think that we haven't got it completely, to the level that we want it at. We haven't got enough depth in enough positions that we want. We're still not finished with our recruitment, and our squad building is not complete yet. So an incomplete squad which focuses on versatility is going to have flaws. I don't think that's too controversial to point out. A squad that we look at as going, yeah, that's complete. Like you look at Liverpool's squad last season. You look at was obviously really depleted, but the season before that, it was looking pretty strong. I think Liverpool are not too far away from that team being complete, but still, of course, are in a problem now where they've got Alisson and Salah and Van Dijk in an aging bracket of their players, and will probably need to be replaced in the coming year, or definitely need to be replaced in the coming seasons as well. PW says Zinchenko is not quality. Ødegaard is. I think that's incredibly harsh on Zinchenko, considering he's a player that evolved that left-back position, and it coincided with him joining and starting the majority of games in our left-back position, from us being a team that challenged for top 4 to a team that challenged for a title. So people's memories are far, far too short for me with Zinchenko. Marcus says, are you aware of FA Rule 2.3456, subset 3.2, whereby you must inform attendees in advance of who guest speakers will be at a live show? I'm not, Marcus. I will probably just have to take the fine in that case. Martin says, versatility definitely has downsides. One player backing up more than one position is a huge flaw, but it's also a big benefit. If you've got a really good player that can cover multiple positions and they're actually a reliable figure in the squad, it is a really good strategy. Sadly, we've had really bad luck. I get the argument that you're never going to have a fully fit squad all season, but frankly, the luck that we have had with injuries has been deplorably bad. It has been really, really poor. So, yes, I get the argument, I get the context, but I still think that it's a viable strategy when it's complete. And at the moment, it's not complete. And that's just the squad building kind of stage where we're at. When you come in three and a half full seasons ago, now into our fourth full season, and you've had to rip up the entire squad, barring some of your young gems, it's going to take longer. It's going to take multiple summers to get the squad to where it is. And it's not going to be completed within those summers because the players that you signed at the start of that project, in some cases, or the players that you kept at the start of that project, have now reached the stage of their career 3.5 years later where they then need to be replaced. It is an ongoing process, but we still haven't reached the peak that this squad, I think, under Arteta can get to under what the plan is in the market. And it was never realistic that that would happen in the amount of time that he's had and the amount of summer transfer windows that we have, which, of course, are 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And we're always going to see a churn. As we get to our fifth summer under Arteta this year coming, I'm expectant that our squad should be in a very competitive position come the end of this summer window. If it's not, then there's some really big questions to be had about our recruitment strategy. Darbas says, having versatile players helps identify the proper needs in the squad whilst buying some time until you can actually find the right players to fill those roles. Short term, it can be a good tactic, and it is fair. But obviously now going into our fifth summer, we're not really in the short-term phase of the Arteta plan. We're in the mid to long-term phase of this Arteta plan. Obviously, a manager like Klopp and Pep that are in their 7th and 8th years are in their long-term part of their projects. We're in the mid to late coming into this summer. So we need to make sure that we've got the squad in a position after this summer transfer window that is very competitive. Otherwise, questions. Archangel says, every team gets injuries. That is expected. Arteta insists in keeping the squad small and multi-skilled. I don't think he does at all, actually. I don't think he does insist on keeping the squad small whatsoever. I think he's worked within the confines of what we've been able to work in to a degree. Could he have spent better the Havertz money to add an extra player? And it would be no more than an extra player because you'd split that 65 into two, perhaps. Sure. But he doesn't insist on the squad being small because he recognises that it's thin. And if he's saying that he thinks the squad is one of the thinnest in the league, he must recognise in himself that obviously he still thinks more is needed. Alexander says, Havertz is a confidence player. He needs to hear our support, in my view. I guess that's why I resist against any negative chat for him. It strikes me as a sensitive guy with his philanthropy and stuff like that. Of course, he's a really decent bloke, is Kai Havertz. But you're right to say I think he's a confidence player. But he's been out at Chelsea for a while in which his confidence was gradually pounded into the ground. He needs to be rebuilt. I don't think we needed to embark upon a project this summer. We decided to, and I think that it's come back to bite us in some ways this season. But I hope that in the long term, it does end up working out for us. Dale says, in general, what do you think Arsenal should do with their injury-prone players? It appears Tierney and Partey will be gone in the summer, but what about Zinny, Jesus and Tommy? Tommy, I think, should stay. Zinchenko is an interesting one. I think that left-back position could still be evolved, but that might be through Timber. So we may have already found the player to evolve that position, but he still may be the right-back. We'll have to wait and see. Jesus, I think we know Jesus' injury issues, but we've got enough players in Trossard and Havertz to cover that role as well. So Nketiah would be moved on for me. Jesus would be kept, and then we'd sign a centre forward to really try and involve that position one more. But I think I'd keep Zinchenko, but I think we've got Timber coming back from these injury issues that he's had. An ACL problem, if rehabbed efficiently and effectively, can stay away for a really long time. You know, if you do the rehab perfectly, if you build up the right amount of strength and with a little bit of luck, you can play out the rest of your career at the top elite level and never experience that injury again. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Hector Bellerin's a great example of that. But I hope that Timber turns out to be the evolution of our fullback areas into the long term, and I look forward to seeing what he brings to the team when he does, of course, return. Mark says, Tom, I'd love to hear whether you think we do well to start Smith Rowe, especially since we're thin in midfield. No one favoured him in the Forest preview, but I think he would do well at the Forest as well. I did actually favour him in the Crystal Palace preview. It's worth pointing out. I would have liked to have seen Smith Rowe start that game. He came on and got a good cameo against Palace. If it is indeed that Rice and, of course, Gabriel are out, we're going to have changes into the midfield. Jorginho coming in, probably Kivior coming into the left centre-back position. Will Smith Rowe take up a role in the midfield? It's difficult to know because, of course, he lacks something of the Well, he lacks something of the defensive side to his game. He's very good going forwards, but defensively there are question marks. So I guess there's an argument to play him, but I still think that we probably won't see him start. But stranger things have happened. Maximus says, "Hi Tom, have you seen the report about Villa being under pressure with profit and sustainability rules and needing to raise funds by June to stay compliant? Any good players that we could poach from them?" Let's have a quick look if we can find the details of that story first. Aggressive FFP declaration made as Aston Villa verdict looms. Aston Villa's president of business operations, Chris Heck, claims Premier League clubs who have breached profit and sustainability rules should receive aggressive punishments. Villa, as well as every other Premier League club, will soon learn whether or not they have been charged. Of course, we knew that. This was back on the 15th of January. But, I mean, that's fine if we can get something more up to date. FFP, Aston Villa. Villa can leverage new transfers against FFP. Here we go. So we're boom, 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 boom. Dan Plumley has insisted that Aston Villa targeting younger players in the January transfer window will help their financial fair play situation. The finance expert admitted that long-term investment can be used to leverage against FFP, with the strategy to be lauded by those outside the club. It obviously helps from FFP perspective if you're signing younger players where the transfer fees are going to be smaller. We know that Aston Villa are trying to look at signing younger players. They were trying to sign that player from Middlesbrough recently as well. But if Jacob Ramsey is one of those players, of course, that's being linked with a potential exit, which I'm surprised about because he's one of those young players that they've already got. I suppose they could look to sell him because he came through their academy, I think, did he not? So, but when you look at that squad at Aston Villa, Pau Torres is a fantastic centre-back, but would be very expensive now if you wanted to try and sign him from them. Elsewhere, though, Boubacar Kamara is a good midfielder. Douglas Luiz, of course, is another one. Looking in their forward line, Ollie Watkins would go for a lot, but he's 28 years of age now. So I'm not sure there's too much in terms of sell-on value. Similar kind of opinion to Ivan Toney. Leon Bailey's proven to be an improved winger. Diaby's not going anywhere. So it's ironic because you look at that squad and you don't go, wow, this is going to be a Champions League qualifying team necessarily, because you don't look at that team and go, yeah, I'd have them and I'd have them. They've got a good midfield. They've got decent defenders. They've got, some good forwards. If they were to have the same injury issues that we have had with some of their starting players, I think they've been very fortunate this season, Villa, with their injury record. So when we talk about the idea of every team has injury issues, well, actually, Villa haven't this season. Villa have been very, very fortunate with their squad this season, and they've been able to keep pretty much their starting 11 as is. The only key player they've really lost is Emi Buendia so far during the campaign, and that's been about it. Tyrone Mings, of course, but they've got such depth at centre-back as well, with Diego Carlos coming back, with Pau Torres being there, Ezri Konsa, of course, still there as well. They loaned in Clement Longley as well. They've got good depth at left-back. But they've been really fortunate with the lack of injuries that they've had to deal with this season. So if that happens to them in the second half of the season, I'll be interested to see how they deal with that. Hussein says we'll end up getting Jon Duran. He's being linked with Chelsea at the moment, which I find really strange. I can't say that I rate the guy too highly, but apparently he is rated incredibly highly at 20 years of age. For Colombia, he's got a goal in 8 games. He scored 4 goals this season in 23 matches. I don't know why Chelsea are being so desperately linked with him. But yeah, it's a strange one, that one. Really strange one. I think we'll end the show there. We're starting to go off on a bit of a tangent about other clubs. It's always a good sign to bring the show to a close. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your time as always. I'll be back tomorrow morning to break down, of course, the game tonight against Nottingham Forest. If travelling up to Nottingham, because, of course, there are train strikes today, then I wish you safe travels. Have a fantastic day and enjoy yourselves. Stay safe, stay well, stay respectful. And I look forward to speaking to you very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.